So today I want to talk about the contractors that were hired to help Barry Morphew with the job in Broomfield the weekend that Suzanne Morphew went missing. Recently, both of them have come out with stories about what took place this weekend. It doesn't paint Barry in the best of pictures, but Jeff Puckett came out with his first, and he spoke with Daily Mail, and soon thereafter, another contractor, this one by the name of Morgan Gentile, she came out. Now, she's been kind of silent for a hot minute, but her name's been kind of very much associated in the way of being the other woman and whatnot. Today, what I'm going to be mostly focusing on in this video is the aspects of what both her and Jeff were talking about in regards to behaviors they saw, what they were doing that weekend, how that weekend played out, their general vibe of the weekend, so on and so forth. So like I said, Morgan recently spoke with Lauren Scharf. She is a reporter who's been covering the story, doing an excellent job. And Morgan came out, I guess, kind of to set the story straight in regards to, her role in the situation, or lack thereof, I should say. Now, she says that this case has broken her family up, has forced her to relocate, and is hindering her finding another job. Morgan flat out tells Lauren when asked, she says, no, Barry and I did not have an intimate relationship of any kind. Now, also, Barry denies that as well. In fact, Barry says, look, there has not been another love in my life since 1988. He's like, it's just not true. So Morgan says that the story that Jeff Puckett came out with about the hotel room and everything that went down that weekend with this job was true. She backs this up, and she adds even more detail to it, which for me did not paint Barry in a good picture, and it also started answering some more questions, but as always, it leaves many more. So let's talk about that chlorine smell. Jeff says he got there Sunday night and that the room smelled really bad of chlorine. Now, Morgan also says that she got there, and in fact, she says when you open the door, it hit you. Your eyes started watering. It was that intense. Both Jeff and Morgan say that there were soaking wet towels on the floor. In regards to the bed, Morgan says, you know what, it looks like, Barry did stay in it, but that he maybe made it up and not a hotel clerk. And then Jeff says that he found some of Barry's mail, specifically, some stuff about property insurance, left there in the wastebasket. And remember, overall, Jeff just kind of said that, it just felt like a bit of a staged alibi, basically. Now, for me, the chlorine thing is not a huge deal. We've heard of other people traveling there saying, oh, the outside smells like chlorine. The hotel manager says they don't use chlorine to clean, that the pool is closed. So I don't know how to feel about the chlorine, but that's not making me go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So let's talk about some of the odd behaviors that Morgan was pointing out in this interview about Barry. So Barry started working Friday evening at the construction site. This is the one near County Road 105 and Vanderveer Road. So Morgan says when Barry picked her up, he was really intense about this one section, and he's like, look, I want it leveled out. I want you to rake it out, make it level. I want it to be, like beach sand and not, the muck. And she says he just kept saying it needed to be flat, and he was acting really weird about it. And she said overall, yeah, he seemed really stressed. So let's fast forward to Saturday. So on Saturday, Morgan was like, look, I was planning on working all day long, but around 11 o'clock, Barry's knocking work off. And he's like, oh, I gotta go make the wife happy and do some hiking and biking. But Morgan's like, you know what? It turns out that he never really left town. He was allegedly around town shopping and whatnot. So that part definitely seems suspect. So let's talk about the job in Broomfield. Now, Morgan does confirm, yeah, you know what? This job was planned a while ago, back in April. Now, for me, that was a big thing at first until some more information came out from her, because I was like, you know what? If this is a complete last minute job, I was going to be like, really, Barry? So she's like, no, this was planned in April, but originally it was just planned to be her and Barry doing it. And she says at the last minute, he changed everything around. Bing, 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 bing. Red sofa flags going off. So she says that he called her on Mother's Day, and that he sounded frantic, he sounded super stressed. And her words were, he sounded like he had the worst Saturday night of his life. And she says that Barry asked her to get a crew together and go to Broomfield to fix this retaining wall. Now, if we flip back to Jeff's interview with Daily Mail, he confirmed, he said, yeah, you know what, I was ordered to Broomfield to work on this wall, but I never saw Barry because he had to leave early or whatever for the family emergency, which at this point we all know what that is. Now, this next part is another big red sofa flag for me. Morgan says that, Barry arrived there first, and that he said he had been working all day long to prep the work site for them. And she's like, but when I looked at the work that he did, she was like, this work would literally maybe take 30 minutes. So she was just like, look, well, what have you been doing, Barry? And of course, soon thereafter, he receives his phone call and he has to leave. Now, another huge thing for me that I was really questioning when the Jeff Puckett interview came out was about these tools, because he talks about it a little bit, and then I feel like Morgan really fills in the details. And she said, you know what, it seemed like he just emptied the bed of his truck of tools and he put them on one of those little hotel carts and left them the tools for them. But she says, you know what, these were tools that you just would never even use to do this job, so they didn't have the proper tools to continue doing the job. Now, Jeff in his interview said, you know what, yeah, despite this being an emergency type job and whatnot, the tools weren't there to do this job. And remember, he was kind of a little, upset, because he's like, look, I waited around for a couple of days and then I finally just left and went home. Now let's go back to Morgan. She says she got a call from Barry Monday morning and he's very upset. He's crying, all this stuff. And he's like, he tells her the news, Suzanne, this is what happened, a mountain lion got her. Now, right here, this was such a red sofa flag for me, because I was like, okay, immediately this mountain lion story is into play. Just what is up with the story? I mean, Monday he's calling her with the story. So right off the bat, it's a mountain lion got her, a mountain lion got her. This is the line that's being fed. So he tells Morgan to wait for this brick to be delivered to finish the job. And, it never comes. And so she's like, you know what, I didn't really want to bother him. I mean, he had something really serious going on. I didn't want to call him and bother him to be like, hey, the bricks haven't shown up. And I wouldn't have either. So she says, basically, we waited around, and then Tuesday, we just went ahead and left. Now, Jeff also confirms that, yeah, he returned back on Tuesday, and that he was paid for the job, but he has not spoken to Barry since. Now, Morgan has an even more interesting story than that. She's like, look, I was approached by two men. One's a family member of Barry's and one is a friend. And they said something I found just very odd and weird. Number one, they were like, look, we give you your paycheck, but we don't want it to look like hush-hush money. And then they were basically like, look, you need to know your rights. You don't have to give your phone over to the CBI. And I mean, my first thing when I heard that is, again, if this is true, allegedly, why in God's name would you say those things? What hush-hush money? Why are you telling her not to give her phone over? This is all very suspect. Now, Morgan says, yeah, you know what? I did cooperate with most everything. She says she interviewed 5 times with him, turned her phone over. There was one thing that she admits to where she's like, you know what? I didn't do that, and that was the polygraph. Now, a next huge thing for me is that she was fired by Barry. And she says that she feels like she was fired because she wasn't staying quiet. She was, cooperating. She was giving them their phone. She was telling what she knew. Now, in response to this, Barry came out, in his conversation with Lauren, and he's like, oh, she's a meth head. She's a meth head. She's just mad because, I fired her. Of course she's not going to have anything good to say about me. She's a meth head. Just like that Jeff. She's a meth head. And he finishes that call up with Lauren saying, look, I am 100% innocent. Now, Morgan finished up her stuff with saying, look, the experience scared me to death, and you know what? Barry scares me to death. I don't ever want to see him again. So now, y'all, let's get to some of the thoughts that I'm having on this, because I've got some. So again, we now have 2 workers talking about this chlorine smell. We've heard other people on YouTube talking about, I went by there, or I called the manager, or this, that, and the other, and whatever. So there's a chlorine smell. Now, again, this isn't huge to me. I need to see a little bit more evidence about that, and, but it's out there. We have some confirmation here from 2 people who were on the scene. Now, when Morgan talks about that evening where she said, you know what, Friday night, Barry's working on the construction site, and he was super weird about her flattening out the place, the space on it, and that whole thing. That's where I'm just like, okay, so what was going on? Why was he acting weird? Why was he weird about this particular space? Did this begin that day, that evening, at some point in there? Now let's go to the day where Morgan's like, look, I was prepared to work, all day, but at 11 o'clock, Barry's like, I'm going to go entertain the wife, basically. And then he ends up staying in town. So this makes me say, first of all, is this normal for him to knock off work like that? Is it normal for him to be like, oh, I got to, go entertain Suzanne, go hiking and biking? Was this something abnormal, or did they do this all the time? After that, when Morgan says, apparently he stayed in town the rest of the day shopping and whatnot, is this true? What was he shopping for? Where did he go? Now, a huge red sofa flag is this Broomfield job in general. Okay, so yes, we have it planned since April. That checks out. That passes the vibe check. What does not pass the vibe check is the fact that he changes it last minute. And it's like, okay, you need to get a crew together and go up there and do all this, in addition to the weird behavior he was already exhibiting. I could understand if he was just last minute, that was an isolated thing of, oh, hey, we need someone else to come up here because of ABC. Okay, stuff happens. But even further that's odd about it is the fact that she says, and then when I got there, and he was like, I've been up here all day long prepping, the work site for you. And she was like, what have you been doing? This should have only taken 30 minutes. Again, you accompany this with all the other odd things going on, and it really makes you wonder, are we really constructing some big, intricate story here, Barry? Or are there just like tons of coincidences and odd behaviors within him and the story that he's telling us? Now, about the tools, so he realizes, oh gosh, there's an emergency, I have to leave. He leaves behind all these tools. So here's some questions that I have about that. Number one, and I'm going to play devil's advocate with this part right here. So number one, he leaves all these tools, and Morgan's like, it looks like he just, unloaded his work truck. Well, number one, I'm like, why did he unload his work truck? Was he trying to make room for something? Wink, wink. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. Number two, I don't know how to build a retaining wall, so I'm just going based on what they said. But number two, if he's just leaving a bunch of random tools, why? Why do that? If you needed A, B, and C to do D, E, and F, then why just leave a ton of stuff there? It almost seems just kind of fabricated. So let's talk about Monday when Morgan receives that other phone call, the mountain lion phone call. Barry's upset. Oh, mountain lion got her. So first of all, again, this mountain lion thing, y'all, it throws up a red sofa flag for me all day long. Psh, 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 all over the place. The fact that he's coming out right away with that, almost like trying to be like, y'all, look, everybody, it's a mountain lion, y'all, okay, that's what it is. It just doesn't set right. Then the whole brick thing where he's like, okay, wait for the brick to arrive. And she's like, it never did. They eventually just end up going. I get stuff happens. But this is what I'm talking about with this case, where there's so many odd coincidences of, well, you know what? Some stuff can happen. But I find myself having to say that over and over and over. It just feels like, okay, so you went up there, you were killing time doing something. You leave a bunch of useless tools, tell them to wait for the brick never shows up, they just leave. It all seems, again, like he's just putting forth a little bit of effort to say, I tried, but it's also trying to form some kind of alibi and whatnot, and it kind of has worked, but I think that there's just a weird vibe about a lot of it, and it's what has people scratching their heads. Now let's talk about the two guys that Morgan alleges approached her. That whole thing right there, I'm like, hold up. That is so shady. Why did two people approach her and say, we don't want to give you a paycheck because it'll look like hush-hush money? Why would they even say that? Even if it was a joke, why would you say that? Why are they telling her what her rights are and that she doesn't have to give her phone to CBI? Why would that even be an option? What is in said phone that would look shady? Why would somebody else be telling her that? What are they trying to hide? Was she really fired by text message? Did he really fire her because she was cooperating? Because let's be honest, pretend that we saw beyond this in 6 months and we found out, damn, wow, Barry didn't do it. It's still going to be weird, for an employee and a boss to be working together and the boss be thinking, well, the employee's throwing me under the bus. But then I'm also like, well, if he had nothing to do with it, and okay, if she gives the investigators, her phone, whatever, that's just going to get closer to an answer, get closer to moving away from those who aren't involved in this and finding out who or what did this. I also think it's interesting that she was interviewed 5 times and that she did not take the polygraph test. Now, let's round this out with Barry's remarks about her, with Barry's remarks about Jeff. Barry says she's a meth head just like Jeff, and she's pissed that he fired her. Well, she was clearly still working for him that weekend. So I'm just like, okay, so you fired her. Why, according to Barry, did you fire her? What happened besides the fact that she was cooperating and answering questions? And again, I'll ask it again. Why is he mad with somebody cooperating? I'll say this again too. If Barry looks at Jeff and Morgan as nothing but meth heads, why in God's name hire them? I mean, why? I believe in second chances and all that kind of stuff, and I think that can be possible. But if you're going to quickly write these people off as just that, then clearly there's no second chances here at this point. I mean, you have a pretty low opinion of them. So why even bring them around your business? There's some people who would take advantage of and exploit people, drug addicts, people who've just been released, situations like that, because they know, if this person's on parole, well, they're not going to quit. They're not just going to walk off. They have to go back to jail, so they're kind of stuck. If they have a record, all that kind of stuff, and it's a special type person that's going to exploit that. So it makes me wonder, is Barry that type of employer that exploits these out of people to have a sense of control over them? Or is he just using slander to discount what they're saying because what they're saying doesn't paint him in a good light? The more and more these stories come out and we can fill in the details and we can look at the different timelines and whatnot of what everyone's saying, for me it just continues to not look good. So obviously I'm holding out hope. I hope she comes home well. Now, as we have seen from Andy, he's not really thinking, he knows the deal. This is Suzanne's brother. So he's pretty much resigned to, what, we're looking for a body. So at that point, it's let's try and bring justice to her. So we're just going to have to see what happens and what Barry does next. Andy has formed a new search that's going to take place out there in Colorado, and I'm very curious to see if Barry's going to be a part of it. We'll stay tuned. If you want to watch more of my commentary on this case or others like it, just click the videos that are popping up. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.